Look around you, at your job, in your friend group, maybe even inside your own home. There is always that one person. They do not fight for things. They do not beg. They do not even seem to try that hard. But somehow they always end up winning. And the strange part, they are not always the smartest, not always the most talented, not always the one who works the hardest. So what do they have that you do not? They understand one thing that most people never figure out. They understand how people actually work. And today, I am going to break down 7 things a man figured out 500 years ago that explains exactly why good, honest, hard-working people keep losing and what to do about it. These are not motivational quotes. These are going to feel uncomfortable, and they should, because the truth usually does. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli was living inside one of the most dangerous political environments in human history, Renaissance Italy, where your closest ally could be planning your downfall before dinner ended, where loyalty was just a costume people wore, where one wrong move could cost you everything. Machiavelli did not survive that world by being the most moral man in the room. He survived by being the most aware, and he wrote it all down. Not to teach people how to be evil. That is the lazy reading. That is what people say when the truth makes them nervous. What he actually wrote was a guide to reality, how power moves, how influence is built, how people behave when something valuable is on the table and nobody important is watching. Here are the 7 things he understood that most people only discover after it is already too late. Good people are the easiest targets. This one stings. But stay with me. The people who get taken advantage of most in life are not the weak ones, not the slow ones, not the ones who lack confidence or skill. They are the good ones, the honest ones, the fair ones, the ones who show up with full effort and treat everyone the same way, whether someone is watching or not. And that goodness, that consistency, it is exactly what makes them easy to use. Here is why. When you are a truly good person, you walk around with invisible expectations attached to you. You expect people to be honest because you are honest. You expect agreements to mean something because you honor yours. You expect that basic human decency will be returned because you never fail to give it. Those expectations are not character flaws. They are actually beautiful. But in the wrong hands, they become a roadmap. The second someone realizes you always give the benefit of the doubt, that you pause before pushing back, that you prefer peace over conflict, they do not need to overpower you. They do not need to be smarter or stronger. They only need to understand you better than you understand them. Machiavelli saw this everywhere. Dirty players never attack your strengths. They study your patterns. They notice who goes quiet when tension rises. They notice who rushes to fix the awkward silence. They map your habits, your comfort zones, your breaking points, and then they move, slowly, carefully, in steps small enough that each one feels too minor to address. A small delay here, a slightly twisted version of the truth there. A quiet shift of blame that nobody notices until it has already landed and stuck. And because each move feels too small to confront, the good person says nothing, adjusts, gives more grace, more time, more patience. And the other side reads every single bit of that as permission to go one step further. This is not bad luck. It is a pattern being exploited. So what is the fix? Stop being completely readable. Not to everyone, not permanently, but stop handing the full picture of yourself, your limits, your reactions, your soft spots, to people who have not earned the right to hold that information. The moment there is something about you that others cannot fully predict, something shifts, not because you became cold or difficult, because you became unknown. And unknown people are genuinely hard to manipulate. You cannot run a strategy on someone you cannot fully calculate. You do not have to change who you are. You just have to stop making it so easy for the wrong people to map you. Chosen weakness is not weakness at all. Here is something that sounds completely wrong before it clicks. Most of us grew up believing that strength should be visible. Show people what you know. Prove what you can do. Make it clear from the start that you are not someone to be taken lightly. Machiavelli watched this play out in real rooms with real stakes. And what he noticed? Visible strength often works against you. The moment you walk in showing everything, every skill, every insight, every sharp observation, people around you quietly close up. They become careful. They stop sharing. They start protecting their angles. They are no longer relaxed. They are guarded. And a guarded person reveals nothing they did not already plan to reveal. Now flip it. What happens when someone underestimates you? They relax. They talk more freely than they intended to. They make decisions faster than they should. They stop filtering themselves because they feel safe, because they believe they already know exactly who they are dealing with. They show you their real priorities, their actual thinking, their honest reactions. And all of that, every single piece of it, is information. This is what Machiavelli called controlled weakness, and it is one of the sharpest tools a person can carry. Let us be clear about what this is not. It is not pretending to be incompetent. It is not playing dumb in a way that embarrasses you. It is not being dishonest about who you are. It is simply choosing when not to show what you know. It is deciding when not to correct an assumption that is actually working in your favor. It is understanding that sometimes the most powerful move available to you is letting someone believe they have the upper hand, while you sit quietly, observe everything, and gather far more than they realize they are giving away. Here is what separates the patient person from the impatient one. The impatient person cannot tolerate being underestimated. It bothers them too much. Their ego steps in and demands recognition right now before the right moment has arrived. So they show their hand early, they correct, they impress, they signal. And in doing so, they close every door that was quietly opening around them. The patient person thinks differently. They understand that early recognition feels good, but costs you real intelligence. Showing too much too early does not build respect in every situation. Sometimes it just makes people more careful around you, and careful people stop being useful sources of information. So the patient person holds back. They observe, they let the room settle into a false sense of certainty about who they are. And then, at exactly the right moment, not a second sooner, they surface just enough to shift the entire dynamic. The key phrase is just enough. Not everything, not a dramatic reveal. Just enough to move the situation in the direction you need it to go. Everything else stays close. Think about the conversations you have been in where someone talked far too much, too soon, and gave away exactly where they stood before any real decision had been made. Compare that to the person who said very little, asked a few quiet questions, and somehow ended the conversation with far more than they walked in with. That second person was not lucky. They were disciplined. They understood something, simple but rare. Information flows toward the person who appears to need it least. When you seem to already have the answers, people do not offer you more. When you seem to be still figuring things out, even if you are not, people naturally fill the space. They explain, they elaborate, they reveal, and you receive all of it without making a single aggressive move. This is the lesson. Not weakness performed as theater, not a game of pretending. Just the quiet discipline to know when not showing your full hand is smarter than showing it, and having the patience to wait for the moment when revealing it actually changes something. Hold back. Observe. Move when it matters. That is not weakness, that is control. Every time you over-explain, you lose ground. Here is something nobody tells you growing up. The more you explain yourself, the weaker you look. We are taught the opposite. Be open. Be transparent. Show people your reasoning and they will respect you for it. And yes, sometimes that works perfectly fine, but Machiavelli saw something most people miss. Every explanation is a transaction and not always a fair one. The moment you start justifying a decision, defending your position, walking someone through your thinking step by step, you stop acting and start seeking. Seeking approval, seeking understanding, seeking confirmation that your answer was good enough to pass. Without realizing it, you just handed the other person the power to judge you. And certain people know exactly what to do the moment that power lands in their hands. They do not rush. They sit with it. They ask one more question. They tilt their head slightly and express confusion about one small detail, not because they are confused, but because confusion makes you talk more. They furrow their brow at just the right moment, not to understand better, to pull more out of you, and it works. Because you are a good person, and good people hate being misunderstood, so you explain further, and then a little more, and then once more just to make sure they got it. But here is what was actually happening the whole time. They were not listening to understand you, they were listening to know you. Every word you added gave them more material, more emotional language they could later twist. More small inconsistencies, however minor, they could quietly pocket and use at exactly the right moment. What felt like an honest conversation was actually a collection process, and you handed them everything they needed, voluntarily, because the silence felt too uncomfortable to sit in. So here is the shift. There is a real difference between explaining and communicating. Explaining is what you do when you are asking for permission to proceed. It signals that you need the other person's agreement before you can feel confident in your own decision. Communicating is simply sharing information that serves a clear purpose, and then stopping. Not every choice you make needs a full walkthrough. Not every silence that follows your decision needs to be filled with more words. Not every raised eyebrow deserves a paragraph in response. Some of your most powerful moments will not be the times you said the perfect thing. They will be the times you said nothing and let the outcome speak on your behalf. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control, and control is exactly what over-explaining gives away. They will never attack you directly. They will position you. This one explains the losses that confuse you the most. The times when you did everything right. You stayed calm, you stayed professional, you handled every single thing exactly the way a reasonable person should, and somehow you still ended up looking like the difficult one, the problem, the person people quietly moved away from. Nobody attacked you, you were positioned. Here is what most people never realize. Direct attacks are actually sloppy, they are visible. They create sympathy for the person being targeted, and they expose the person doing the attacking. Anyone who truly understands how influence works never attacks head-on. Instead, they arrange context. They pick the right moment, the right audience, the right small piece of information dropped casually in front of the right person at exactly the right time. Then they step back, say nothing more, and let human psychology finish the job for them. Think about how clean this actually is. You do not need to call someone unreliable. You just mention their missed deadline, framed as concern, framed as "I just want to make sure things are okay." At the exact moment, the boss is already quietly frustrated with that person. You do not need to make someone look emotional. You just make sure you appear perfectly calm every single time they are visibly stressed. The contrast speaks for itself. You never said a word. You do not need to question someone's ability out loud. You just make sure their mistakes are visible to the people who matter, while their best work somehow always happens when nobody important is in the room. None of this looks like an attack. None of it can be named, confronted, or defended against cleanly. And that invisibility? That is the entire design. So what do you actually do about it? The first step is simply to see it. That alone is most of the work. When you recognize that the environment around you is arranged rather than neutral, you stop reacting to individual moments and start reading the whole structure. Ask yourself, who always seems to be nearby when things go wrong for you? Who benefits when you come across a certain way? Whose calm is always perfectly on display right at the moment your patience is being pushed hardest? Once you see the pattern, the second step is to refuse the role. Every positioning strategy depends entirely on you responding the way they expect. The emotional reaction, the defensive explanation, the visible frustration. The moment you receive that pressure and give back nothing, no reaction, no performance, no expected output, the entire design loses its foundation. Stay still, watch the structure. And when you do move, do not argue against the specific accusation. Move around the entire environment it was built inside. That is how you beat something you cannot punch directly. You simply stop being the person they wrote the script for. Fairness is a trap when only one side is playing by it. Machiavelli was not against fairness. He was honest about when it works. Fairness works beautifully when both sides genuinely agree to the same standard. When that happens, it builds trust, reduces friction, and produces results neither side could create alone. But the moment one side quietly stops honoring that agreement, while the other side keeps faithfully applying it, fairness stops being a shared principle. It becomes a one-sided disadvantage. And most good people fall into this trap not because they are naive, but because they are loyal. Loyal to the standard. Loyal to the belief that if they keep holding up their end, the other side will eventually return to theirs. Dirty players know this about good people. They know good people hesitate to escalate. They know good people are more afraid of appearing unfair than of being quietly and consistently taken from. So they push a little further each time, testing whether this step also passes without a response. And when it does, they take another step. Machiavelli said it plainly: justice without enforcement is just decoration. It communicates values, but produces no consequence. And people who have already decided that consequences are the only language worth responding to are completely unmoved by decoration. The adjustment, playing accurately, is not the same as playing dirty. Accuracy means reading the environment as it actually is, not as you wish it were, and adjusting your responses to match reality, not the ideal version of things you are hoping for. When someone steps outside the shared agreement, you do not insist on maintaining it alone. You adjust, quietly, precisely, without making it dramatic, just enough response to make it clear that the behavior carries a real cost. Once a cost exists, the calculation changes, because people who ignore principles respond to prices. Slow down. Urgency is their weapon, not yours. Machiavelli watched impatience destroy positions that should never have been lost. He watched people hand over their negotiating power simply because the silence became too heavy to sit inside. He watched smart people reveal every card they were holding, not because they were forced to, but because the discomfort of waiting became worse than the cost of speaking. And the people across the table, they said nothing. They waited and collected everything the silence eventually produced. This is a weapon most people never use. Not because they do not have access to it, but because sitting with unresolved tension without rushing to fix it requires something most people never train: tolerance for uncertainty. Dirty players manufacture urgency. It is one of their most reliable tools. They push for quick answers. They create artificial deadlines. They frame things as though the window is closing and the decision must happen right now, before you have had time to think clearly. Urgency benefits them. Stillness benefits you. When you deliberately slow down, not as a game, but with full awareness of why, you break the rhythm they built their approach around. They pushed. You did not immediately respond. That alone shifts the balance. Now they are waiting, and waiting creates in them exactly the pressure they were trying to create in you. They start wondering whether they misjudged you, whether they moved too early, whether you are more composed than they assumed. The silence you held without explanation, without apology, became active. It did something to them without requiring anything from you. Respond when you are ready, not when the pressure tells you to. Those two timelines are almost never the same, and the space between them is where outcomes are actually decided. Make yourself expensive. Machiavelli never promised harmony. He promised something more durable: position. The kind of position that does not collapse every time someone tests it. The kind that does not require constant defense because the cost of attacking it is already understood to be high. Here is the truth most people resist. Position is not given to you because you deserve it. It is not awarded because you're a good person with solid character and genuine intentions. It is built through consistent demonstration that certain behavior in your direction carries a real, reliable cost. Not a dramatic cost, not a punishing one, just enough that the calculation changes. Real power does not announce itself. Real power shapes the conditions of every interaction quietly, before the interaction even begins. It happens through what you consistently accept and what you consistently do not, through where your attention flows and where it stops, through the slow build-up of moments where you chose precision over reaction and people around you noticed without you ever saying a single word about it. Dirty players operate where access is open and reactions are predictable. When the access closes, when reactions stop being automatic, when engagement stops being guaranteed, they do not fight for it, they redirect. Because their system depends on return. No return means no reason to invest. Without confrontation, without drama, without a single raised voice, you become too expensive to bother with. This is not about becoming cold. It is not about shutting people out or performing distance as a power move. It is about something quieter and more permanent, becoming genuinely settled in yourself, knowing who you are clearly enough that someone's commentary about it does not find any place to land, knowing what you value clearly enough that attempts to confuse your priorities simply bounce off, knowing what you will and will not accept clearly enough that testing your limits stops feeling worth the effort. When that clarity exists inside you, not as a performance but as a genuine settled state, it radiates outward in ways you do not have to manage. People sense it before you open your mouth. They sense when limits are real. They sense when engagement is chosen rather than automatic. They sense when the person in front of them will not scramble under pressure or explain themselves into vulnerability. And they adjust accordingly. The real point of all of this, everything you just heard, comes back to one thing: not power over other people. Power over yourself. Power over your reactions, your timing, what you reveal and what you hold back, where your energy actually goes. The moment you stop reacting on command, the moment you stop filling every silence with words that can be used against you, the moment you stop handing your limits to people who are actively measuring them, something quietly shifts. Not overnight, not dramatically, but people around you start being more careful, not because you threatened anyone, because they cannot fully read you anymore. And unreadable people are expensive to deal with. You do not need to win every argument. You do not need to correct every wrong impression. You do not need to fight loudly for your position. You only need to hold it, quietly, consistently, long enough for the people watching to understand this one does not move easily. You do not become powerful by adding noise. You become powerful by removing predictability. Which of the 7 hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who keeps getting played without understanding why, share this with them. Because awareness changes everything, and it is free. Stay sharp.